GM to YouTube, and we're here with Mohka blog number 47. Of course they drop it on my honeymoon, dude. Why, man? I can never... Okay. Let's look at this. We'll see what it is. I think there's some good and some bad here. Rewards were not strong or interesting enough, so we built our new designs with this in mind. We're still planning to include content-specific rewards like a teleport item and a pet. For now, though, we want to focus on the rewards you'll be voting on. Okay, cool. Okay, the boots. I felt like the boots were totally fine. So let's see what they did with it. We'll start with something familiar. As we mentioned before, we've iterated on our original design instead of replacing it entirely. These boots will now drop in a form that can be immediately worn, with the ability to upgrade them by using the Cerb boots one at a time. Really nice. I like that a lot. It's really annoying that you are required to go get pegs immediately. This just gives you the option of adding them slowly over time. With their ranged strength stats, the treads will be best in slot as soon as they drop. Yep, so they come with range strength by default. Combining them with the Cerb boots will give them further buffs. So let's take a peek at the damage again. So we start with the 1% damage, 2 range strength, 4 melee strength, but it goes up to 6 melee strength, 3 range strength, and 2% mage damage. I don't know how necessary the extra damage was. I mean, it's not necessarily bad, but yeah, so these have 4 melee strength by default, which is actually worse than Prim's. They're the same as Dragon Boots, but then, you know, they're very good for ranging. Okay, sure. I really like the adding boots in, though. That's an excellent change. They definitely needed to do that. So the following benefits will be gained by combining them: plus 2 melee, plus 1 range strength, plus 1% mage damage. Yeah, okay. This design means that there is no longer an outright requirement to have Pegasian boots for the treads to become useful, which should help to alleviate economic pressure on ranger boots. Sure, I'm okay with this. They are tradable, so the base boots are tradable. Untradable once you start upgrading. Boots can be reverted to their component parts. Oh yeah, also, they said it requires a number of demon tears, which is some kind of currency. So I think they'll be talking about that. A boot, some amount of demon tears to upgrade at one time, and then you need 3 sets for the total maxed out boots. So we have kind of a ward situation going on where once you buy them, you don't want to sell it again. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm okay with this. Not a big deal. Also, this is how they look. They look kind of sick. We wanted to offer 3 different aesthetic options for these boots. The new design proposal complicates the work required to do that, so we'll be proceeding with just one. Still very stylish option. So no more kits for the boots. Interesting. I would have liked getting kits from here, but it's okay. That's okay. Okay, demon tears. So what are these demon tears you'll be using to upgrade your treads? This new resource drop is tradable and consumable, and we intend them to be common enough that using them to create other rewards won't be too much of a grind. All our reward proposals require some number of them, although we haven't settled on the exact amounts. Well, in most cases, the demon tears will be used to craft upgrades. You'll see that the eye, uses them as charges too. We're aware that chargescape is a contentious topic, but we feel like a recent charge systems have struck a great balance, and the way you'll charge the Eye of Ayak is one such. Before we look at this, I want to show, I did send a bunch of ideas for items to Jagex, and they did not use them, but this kind of has the idea that we were going with. So I wanted to show this. This is what we sent to and Hedron made the design and came up with the rough idea for it, so really sick. Good job, Hedron. Basically, we had the idea for effectively a volley staff, where this thing is purely used as a spec weapon, mainly. 6-tick attack speed, very high mage accuracy, 2-handed, and then it's a 50% spec energy, unleashes demonic ether, reduces the target's mage level based on damage dealt. So this was the idea we sent to them. I was just thinking of mage BGS. This would be super good in places like Toa. Anywhere that you're maging something with decent defense, almost anything in God Wars, this would be good on. A lot of good options for using this. So this would really fit in the game well. Also, it doesn't just benefit Shadow, it benefits the other weapon. So that was the idea with this. So this one-handed mage weapon will speed up your grind towards 2-mech and Shadow and give you power and utility beyond it. The Shadow is currently good across the entire game, but its slow attack speed means it's not always the right tool for the job. The Eye, however, will zap enemies at shorter intervals with a rapid 3-tick attack speed, so 3-tick mage weapon, with damage somewhere between Sang and 2-mech and Shadow. So we have the Mage Bofa. Once you've obtained your Shadow, the Eye will continue to offer utility with its magic rending special attack. The special attack is slower, 5-tick, but has increased max hit. You'll want it too, because every point of damage will drain your opponent's magic defense. Yes, we mean magic defense. So your Twisted Bow will hit just as hard. Keep that in mind. This is really overlooked. Magic defense, not magic level, okay? We're not draining level like a Circle does, or like the Accursed Scepter does. This is mage defense. This is extremely important, and we'll get into that. It'll also charge passively if you have one in your inventory when defeating the Doom. Oh, kind of interesting. So if you bring it along, you're juicing it. I'm assuming it'll be good when fighting Mokha. So interesting that it passively charges while using it. That's kind of a cool concept. It's kind of like Arclight in a way. Uncharging the staff will give you whatever you put in, and demon tears are prioritized for consumption over runes. Duplicate unique drops from the Doom can be broken down into demon tears of desired finds, just like Zulrah. Cool. The Eye will be tradable when uncharged. Very typical. Okay, so let's look at the stats. We have 3-tick attack speed, 2 prayer bonus, 6 range, which is rough. We'll get into that as well. The Sang has a 7 range, which means 9 on long range, so this would be 8 on long range, and that matters a lot. So the spec is a slower hit with doubled accuracy, 30% higher max hit, drains mage defense equal to the damage dealt. And it's 100% spec. That's brutal. That's really brutal. I'm gonna be honest with you, the spec is dog shit. It's not useful at all. Cost per attack, 2 death runes, 1 chaos rune. This is actually really expensive because it's 3 tick. I'm curious, like they said, it's passively charging while it's like in your inventory at the boss. Don't know if they're thinking like the demon tiers are going to be like the main way you're attacking with this. It's kind of weird that they've tied demon tiers to runes here as well. Okay, kind of interesting. I don't know how I feel about that. I feel like it should just require tiers, like a vial of blood for Scythe. I think that's why they didn't, because people don't really like that Scythe requires vials of blood. I don't know. I think it completely depends how these work and how they're dropped, how I'll feel about this. But okay, let's get into this. Let's break this down. Obviously, taking a little bit of our idea for the staff, for the spec here. First of all, in my opinion, anytime you're adding like a good like weapon that's used for DPS, right? A weapon you're attacking with, giving it a good spec on top doesn't really seem necessary. Obvious is like blowpipe, where like you could split this into multiple different items and have them drop from different things. When we've had such a struggle coming up with rewards here, it seems kind of weird to dump everything on this one item when you could just add that staff that we came up with to like something else, like Yama or something, you know? Like I feel like this locks them out of using that now, and now everything is on this one weapon, which I kind of feel like they shouldn't have done. So the mage defense thing is interesting. Draining mage defense. So the idea behind that, and the reason they would want to do that, is because mage level affects T-bow max hit, right? In a lot of cases, it doesn't actually matter in places like Toa, but there are some places where draining mage is bad for T-bow if you're going to use T-bow. So I get why they're like avoiding draining. Also, mage affects like the accuracy of their damage against you, so it kind of just does everything. I get why they're avoiding draining that. However, the fact it drains mage defense makes it a lot worse. I'm going to pull up the formula a second. Okay, here we go. So there's a lot of numbers on the screen. The only one we care about is this. Defense roll for the NPC. So this is how the thing you're attacking defends against your attack and what makes you miss, okay? This is how they block your attacks. So we have 9 plus their mage level times their mage defense plus 64. Okay, a lot of numbers. What does that mean? That means, let's say it's a goblin, okay? I think a goblin has 1 mage. Okay, 1 mage, okay? And they would have 0 mage defense. It's 9 plus 1, which is 10, times 64, right? That means that draining NPC's mage defense matters a lot less than draining their actual mage level most of the time. Now, obviously, these are multiplying together, so that's not always the case. Let's say it's something, a good example is Ziliana. Okay, Ziliana's one that it would be okay on, or she has 100 mage defense and 300 mage, okay? So draining a static amount of that smaller mage defense, if we go back down, 9 plus mage level times mage defense plus 64, this number's massive, and this number's actually smaller. So draining the smaller number that's multiplying by the bigger number matters more than if you drained the big number, right? There are edge cases where it matters a lot, okay? And it's better. Most of the time, NPCs have a lower mage level and a really high mage defense. Let's look at Warden. Not a good example, actually. So this is one where it matters quite a bit as well. 150 mage, 20 mage defense, okay? Here's the question, can we drain this into the negatives? We've never been able to drain a style defense before, so how is that going to work? I don't know. I doubt it would be able to drain in the negatives. Do NPCs recover this stat? Are they going to start recovering this stat? I don't know, because they do regen defense slowly over time. Are they going to regen the style defense? I don't know. Are they just going to be permanently drained? I have no idea. We've never seen this before. This is a new effect. So in a case where something has really low mage defense, here's another good example, Akka. Also, Akka recovers his stats really fast, so typically this doesn't matter, but assuming you could, he only has 10, right? It's kind of a problem when they have super low mage defense because draining this number just doesn't do very much because it's plus 64, right? So it's 10 plus 64. So draining this small number doesn't really do much. Okay, let's look at Zebak. Here's something people mage. He has 100 mage and 200 mage defense. Okay, so this is a massive number plus another big number versus a small number plus a small number, right? So draining this small number that's multiplying by this massive number is going to matter more, right? What am I trying to say with this? The spec is not good. You can actually plug this into Gearscape and send this over to custom. Effectively, when you start draining, it would be roughly 30 mage defense you're draining on average, okay? So when you're using a shadow against, let's throw in Zebak. Let's make sure we get Salt in there. Okay, we're draining 30 defense. Let's look at the accuracy. 87.89 versus 170, which becomes 89.26. It's not a massive leap there. Now, I will say this can be used in addition to something like Seer Call or a Scepter. So you could Scepter spec and then So like you could drain their mage level and then also drain their mage defense. The problem is the spec takes 100% and it's doing the same thing a scepter does. If I plug in a scepter spec right now, you see that does the same thing, okay? But the scepter costs 50% energy. It doesn't cost 100%. So this spec is not always the case, but most of the time the same as a scepter. Now there's some edge cases where maybe if you can drain it into the negatives, we just don't have details. Here's another example, right? Zulrah recovers defense really fast, but maybe, my head's in the way, maybe you can drain this into the negatives and maybe it doesn't recover. Okay, in that case, the spec is good at Zulrah, right? Because you could drain this number further and get even more damage. So if you can drain into the negative, it might have some weird use cases, not a ton. Basically, this spec is flavor. It feels a lot like Nox's Halberd, where you're giving it a spec for the sake of it having a spec bar. Let's be honest. You're not using Nox Halberd spec ever for any reason. It's going to be the same thing with this for the most part. You can avoid, if this is your default mage weapon in Toa, you can avoid bringing an additional spec weapon. It's not like, I'm struggling. I'm struggling to rack my brain for the specs use. It's just not there. I feel like they've locked themselves out of making the cool staff and have made it like just have a spec for fun. I don't know if Jagex doesn't know it's less useful to drain mage defense. In my opinion, this is what they should do. They should allow it to go into the negatives if they're going to go with this. They should allow it to go into the negatives and maybe drain 2 defense per damage instead of 1. So it's doing double. I think then it might be worth considering speccing. Right now, the fact it competes with Scepter at double the energy cost, you're not using this. And the Scepter already wasn't good. Let's be honest. Who was bringing a Scepter into Toa? Very few people. Very, very rare that it had any utility. So for this to be like, it's almost as good as a Scepter sometimes, you're not selling me. You're not selling me on this. No one is using this spec. Okay, the staff itself, though, I don't have the numbers yet because Gearscape hasn't added it. They said they would add it tonight. They've said DPS between Sang and a Shadow. Okay, that's good. Cool. We have some problems. First of all, it's really fast. That makes it awkward to use in some cases. A good example is maging Vest Portal, for example. Some people will be sanging or tridenting that. You will not be using this because it's 3 tick. It's 4 ticks to run in and out. So you could just sit underneath Vespula and face tank her and just die. That's an option. No one's going to be doing that. So there's a lot of cases where the 3-tick attack speed is a problem, and it makes it really hard to use. The other thing is the range is really low. It's 6 instead of 7. That makes it hard to use as well. And the main problem with that range is Olm's Mage Hand. So if you are standing on the melee safe spot tile, you cannot mage. You cannot mage and hit Olm. So if you've got a meleeer meleeing the melee hand, it cripples. He swaps to mage. He can't use the staff. I mean, you could flinch in to where it's dangerous occasionally, and there might be some kind of weird walk pattern you can do. And it's going to be at the best very annoying to use at Olm. Solo, the attack speed, you can do solo Olm with this, but you're going to drag. I mean, it's going to lose a tick when you drag. So like you can do the it would be what 4-0, right? But you're losing ticks running. You could tank an Olm hit every time that you're doing the mage cycle, which would be awful. You would take so much damage. You could drop a tick intentionally. I think it's at minimum losing 1 tick, maybe 2 per cycle. It's a little awkward. I don't know if that's even going to come out better than a Sang. What you could also do is bring a Sang and just drag with the Sang so you don't lose the tick, but now you have to bring 2 mage weapons into chambers. I get why they made it 6 range, because it's a fast weapon. You think fast weapon, little lower range, but like feel like it just doesn't work well for this. I don't think they should be doing this because it really just screws Olm. It really screws Olm. It makes it very, very hard to fight him with it. And that's one of the main things you want mage for is Olm hand. Of all the bosses in the game, that's probably the thing you mage the most, honestly. There's 3 hands every chambers. A huge chunk of the fight is spent maging. If you can't use the new mage weapon there, what a bummer. What a bummer. That's a huge amount of its use case. Just gone, basically. Honestly, overall, I feel like we have just kind of a scrambled egg item here. I will say, if this is supposed to be the Mage Bofa, it is very strange that it's also tremendously harder to use than Sang. Think about Sang, okay? It's this very forgiving weapon. It's not fast. It's fairly long range, right? It's got everything, and then it heals you. So Sang is like the easier weapon to use. That's the idea. Then you get to Shadow. Think about Shadow at like Olm or things like that. Like it's really hard to use. Some people are using Sang at Olm hand. Obviously Shadow hits really hard, but it has a learning curve in a lot of cases. Suddenly you have to learn Butterfly Aqua. Mohka. It makes sense for the extremely expensive item to have the harder learning curve, I feel like, because that's the kind of player that would appeal to. Making the Mage Bofa also really hard to use and really awkward to use, I feel like is a little weird. Think about how easy Bofa is to use also. Very, very long range, works on a lot of things, very accurate, very simple. Just slap on crystal armor and it works fairly well. There's not a lot going on with it. It's 4-tick attack speed. It's not super fast. It's not like a blowpipe where you're like, imagine trying to do shamans with a blowpipe, for example. Like that's really difficult. Using a Bofa typically is like the easy option. Like it makes things easy to hit. It's very long range, fairly forgiving to use, right? We have this thing that's kind of got a weird identity going on because this appeals to me. To me, I'm like, oh, I can flinch in and do those Ohm hits. But like, I can't picture someone going to chambers with their in-betweener saying shadow weapon and trying to flinch from melee hand and like not tank Ohm hits at all and screw up everybody else. I don't know. I feel like they might have lost the plot a little bit. I will go back to my idea again. This is a spec weapon that typically is benefiting lower mage weapons more, but is helpful to shadow. It's just all around a good item. That was the idea with this. And I'm not saying they should go back and use this. I like the idea of a mage Bofa. Think about like someone with a Sang trying to use this. Like it's like walk up spec them and then use your weapon. It's a little bit easier to use. I don't know. I feel like something's missing here. I think at the very least they need to make the range not 6. I think that would solve a lot of problems. If it's 7 tile range, the exact same as Sang, now you can use it on Ohm hand just fine. That would solve a lot of problems. I don't know how I feel about the 3-tick attack speed. Obviously, it's amazing at Nilo Room, but is making the Mage Bofa the Nilo Room killer really the play here? I don't know. I feel like a slower weapon almost would make more sense. It's not bad. You'll be able to use this most of the time, most places. I think it's really lame that it doesn't work well on Ohm's Mage Hand. I think that's a huge use case. For the most part, it's okay. I really think as well as the range change, they should just remove the spec. I feel like this spec is going to trick Redditors into thinking it's good. And then like people are going to use it and be like, oh, this doesn't do anything. It definitely feels like I don't know if Jagex don't know that it's not good, but typically this is going to be the same as a Scepter spec, and that is not good. That is not a good spec. Yeah, okay. We'll move on. Enough time with the big staff. Confliction Gauntlets. Okay. So it's Torm's 7% mage damage. Okay. When you miss a magic attack with the gauntlets equipped, your next magic attack of the same type, same weapon, or spell against the same enemy will roll accuracy twice. You can craft the gauntlets using a Mokha cloth on a Torn bracelet, similar to Rancor. Makes sense. 83 crafting, 70 smithing. That's very reasonable. Okay. When crafted, the Confliction Gauntlets will be tradable. Makes sense. That's not all. The item comes with a new passive effect. When you miss a mage attack with the gauntlets equipped, your next mage attack of the same type, same weapon or spell against the same enemy will roll accuracy twice. This means that if you're already hitting all of the time looking at you, Shadow, you won't be benefiting much. But if your accuracy is more middling, you'll see some great returns. What does that mean? What is that going to look like? I actually have a mod in my Discord, Sci-Fi, who went and charted it out. What does that look like? This one. Okay, numbers, chart. What does this mean? Okay, so orange line is the boosted accuracy when it misses. So this would be your every other hit. The yellow line is base accuracy. So what it is without that effect. And the red is the average between the two numbers. All right, we follow? We follow? So you can see we have this like larger gap here as we're moving up about the 60% mark, and after that it falls off hard. You can see over 80%, the base accuracy and the boosted accuracy basically the same. It's really not changing anymore after 80%, okay? Maybe a slight change. Actually, I have a zoomed in graph past 50% as well. So you can see that like endpoint, it's the same. It's the exact same past like 95%. So what does this mean? In practice, what does this mean? If you have around 60% accuracy or lower, you're getting a tremendous buff of about 5% accuracy or more. At most, it's around 34%, 35%. It's getting buffed by like 8%. But when you're maging, okay, you're never maging if you're like this inaccurate, right? Like this chunk of the graph is typically a thing you're just not ever doing. So we're looking for those big jumps where you're really inaccurate. A really obvious one is Akka with like a Sang. Akka with a Sang is around 60%. Okay, that's in like not max mage, like Arims, that kind of thing. At 60%, you're getting a buff of about 5% accuracy. So you're going from 60 to 65% accuracy with these bracelets. So massive for things like Akka. Another good example, and this is a problem I feel like because they say looking at you Shadow as if it doesn't affect Shadow. I don't think that's true because there's things people mage that have really high defense. Good example is Zabak. We can see, assuming you're not doing a circle spec or something, max mage on a Zebak in a 500, 64%. What does that mean? It's getting buffed by another 5% accuracy. I can actually probably drain him enough to get it to the point where it shows that number. Yeah, it's actually about 20 circle damage. It's about a 10% increase at Zebak. Not a joke, 10%. So suddenly, like, T-Bow on Zebak is probably dead. That's gone. So to pretend like this doesn't buff Shadow is a little weird to me. I don't agree with that. It buffs Shadow very little in a case like Akka. You have 90% accuracy, and it's not doing much, right? But this suddenly opens up the ability to mage things that were already super, super tanky. Another good example is Zilliana. Zilliana has 300 mage level, right? We still mage her. 70% accuracy. That's getting a big buff. That's like a 4% accuracy increase. My big issue is things like this, where something that's completely trolling, it's not bad anymore. Camping Shadow at Nex is actually beating ZCB Camp. When we add the new boots here, we've got the additional stats for the Torm just added here on this Javelin in the ammo slot. You could see that Shadow's actually beating ZCB, which is kind of jokes. I think this opens up a lot of problems where people are going to start trolling a lot of places, and it won't be trolling anymore. Things like Shadow Camp Zulrah suddenly is okay. When we throw in the new gear against Zulrah in blue phase, which you would never mage, 40% accuracy, we remember that's in that region where it gets the massive buff, like 7% accuracy. So this is suddenly like not terrible. So it's not gonna be T-Bow Camp anymore. It's gonna be Shadow Camp Zulrah. I'm picturing a world where people are going into Tawa with very minimal melee switches, camping mage gear, and just doing things like Baba with Shadow, which is, you can see 51% accuracy, suddenly not so bad. If we check Kefri, 54%. I don't know how I feel about this. The pretending that this is not a huge buff to Shadow is a little weird to me. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't think that's true. Another good example is Shadow Camp in Inferno, which is a meme, and I've always laughed at people doing this. On Zuck, it has terrible accuracy, 63%. Suddenly that's really good because these gloves are insane. Anytime you have low accuracy, these are crazy and they go off. And there's a lot of cases where Shadow doesn't have good accuracy and you need to take advantage of it. Keep in mind that all the calcs I'm doing are without the double accuracy roll thing. So I plugged in one of the mages at Nex. It's 6.5% worse for Shadow than T-Bow, but after the accuracy bonus, it actually wins. It's actually beating on the mages. So literally next meta would now be ditch range completely and bring max mage. I think you've opened up a lot of problems with something like this. I don't know how to feel about this. I don't think it avoids buffing Shadow like Jagex thinks it does. I don't know about that. I'm gonna reread the sentence, okay? This means that if you're already hitting all of the time, looking at you Shadow, you won't be benefiting much. But if your accuracy is more middling, you'll see some great returns. So what this does is the few places where Shadow doesn't hit all the time, which is actually a lot of bosses, where it just hits okay, but not great, now it hits really well. We've taken it from Shadow everything to Shadow everything. Everything. Like, not a joke, everything in the game you will be shadowing. Okay, how do they fix this? What should they do? Don't make this a glove effect. Make it an offhand. Make it a shield. So I actually also had a design for this. Do you have the link for that? This was one of the ideas for an item we sent to Jagex as well. This is the Heart of Mokha. This is an offhand shield. It's like a little talisman you would hold, effectively. But the idea was that it was extremely, extremely accurate and less damage. Okay, so it's less damage than a ward, but super, super accurate. And the idea was in places where you're using Sang, now you're getting a big buff if they have a lot of mage. So a good example is anything in a CM. Everything in CM is really tanky and really hard to hit with a Sang. So suddenly this gives you like a 5% DPS increase on things like Vanguards or Olm, that kind of thing. So putting this kind of thing on an offhand means that it can't buff Shadow because you can't equip it with a Shadow. I think it would work a lot better and be a lot less detrimental to the game. This as well, different item we sent to them, was the Torm upgrade, the Hand Wraps of Renewal. Mage damage 7%, very, very similar to the Torms. But the idea was that it would be buffing elemental spells. It was just going to be an additive number. So you're just adding this number to whatever the weakness is. So if it's something like, I think Kriara has like a 30% air weakness, this would be 50%. So it's just a straight up buff to Torms with some flavor, okay? And the flavor means that things like Harmstaff are suddenly good in a lot of places. Things like Abyssal Portal, which is weak to fire, you can suddenly start using Fire Surge pretty effectively. I believe that beats T-Bow. It was in between T-Bow and Shadow there. Just like a more interesting effect, also pairs really well with them bringing back or bringing more elemental weaknesses in the summer. They said that they'd be doing that. I feel like going with something like this and then something like this, I feel like it's just less detrimental to the game. I don't know. This direction they took the gloves is in a really weird place where it's just like disgustingly broken, I feel like. I'm not saying they have to use my exact thing. One of the things we've talked about as well is this would be broken in PvP. I think making it not work in PvP, or do a thing like they did with the gloves where it's rolling accuracy, like some kind of special effect, and make that just not work in PvP would work well. Something like that. They could just make the effect that, except on an accurate offhand, and I think it would be totally fine. The problem is it's on gloves, and gloves work with everything, including shadow, even though they claim it doesn't. It works incredibly well with shadow. This is disgusting. It just isn't buffing shadow at the places you use it. It opens up more options for shadow, and shadow does not need more places you can use it. It doesn't need that. It is the most used mega rare in the game. It has the most use cases. Maybe not all the most useful use cases. Obviously, a scythe is the most expensive. But Shadow has this giant breadth of places you use it at. Like, it just works on everything. It's kind of like the Fang, where it just is good, like, everywhere. Like, you can just figure this thing is probably a good option almost everywhere in the game. And adding these gloves is not going to change that. In fact, it's going to make it much worse and make it so, yeah, that is literally just the thing you use everywhere. I would really like to see these changed. I do not want these. Obviously, people are going to vote yes, it will come into the game. It's really, really strong. I think it's too strong. I think this is too much. I really do. Looking at it, it's just crazy how much of a buff this is for Shadow. And it's also a tremendous buff for other things as well. Something I thought about was Barrage in Inferno. You could bring just these gloves. And then, you know, you have like a 50-60% chance of hitting on things. Suddenly landing freezes on melees is like a thing you can do. Healing off things becomes much easier. It's quite good there. Another idea is a lot of people bring one-way Sang or one-way, like, or two-way Sang into Tob if you're not a mage, just to hit Vasilius. Well, if you do two-way with these gloves, it's like a 60% accuracy, right? So you're getting a massive, massive buff, right? So in cases like we're not bringing the full mage switch, it's really, really strong. I think things like that, totally fine, right? If they make it a shield, I think that kind of thing is okay, and it's kind of interesting that, like, bringing less mage switches is suddenly good, because they made that real bad with mage rebalance by taking away all the occult damage. They made it so bringing one-way mage places is really, really, really bad. So bringing that back a little bit might be kind of nice, might be kind of appropriate. But this is not it. This is disgusting for Shadow, and it's way too much, I think. Like, ridiculous. I feel like they totally missed that. As soon as you start to think about all the places, like, people don't use a Shadow, but it's, like, okay at, you start to think of a lot of problems, and it opens up a lot of problems. It's just not good for the game. I really don't think so. I think the fact that we're concerned about the minimum hit thing being too much, if they gave it more minimum hits, like before with the necklace, I think it was. I don't know. This is way, 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 way more broken than that. Like, way, way better. Like, concerningly good. Yeah, I think take this effect, make it a shield. Shadow can't use it. It's probably a great addition to the game. This is broken. Just straight up, it's broken. I don't know. I'm not going to vote yes to this, honestly. It's just broken. It's really, really strong. Too strong. The last reward's the fucking shovel, bro. I don't know how I feel about the name. I think, I don't know. Whew, okay. Maybe TOS. I don't know. Apparently this was a Reddit idea. I think I missed it entirely, but what better place for it to come from than a burrowing boss? Osto, Ayak has the chance to drop a burrowing appendage, one of the little spiked tips from the bottom of his shield that can be used with a small number of demonic tears and a spade to produce. I'm not even going to say it, dude. I'm not saying it. This is a one-time demonic tears cost. The burrowing appendage drop would be untradeable. Once crafted, the demonic digger would be tradable. When used... Oh, I said it. I'm so sorry. When used for harvesting, farming crops, any spade actions are processed instantly. So you just instantly one-tick the herb patches. Oh, I'm so good with a buff to herb patches, I'm going to be honest. Picking herbs sucks. So I'm totally good with this. Just the name is a little... I don't know how I feel about that. Interesting. No, I think this is a good addition. A little bit of a weird addition, kind of like the Abyssal Worm thing for Yama, but... And that's it. Okay, so on blog number 97, I think we're still not quite there, I'm going to be honest. I like the boots. Stop touching the boots. The boots have always been fine. And of course, the other items... I've got some problems. I'm going to be honest. They have some major problems. I think this could be added, like the staff could be added to the game as is, and it wouldn't be horrible, but it's got some major issues, I feel like, and I would change some things about it. The gauntlets are insane. They're ridiculously broken. I don't know what else to say about them. They're just utterly broken. So, yeah. At least the shovel's good. Man. Mohka's tough. It's crazy how good the items for Yama were after blog of this. I don't know. overall take on blog number 47. The boots are good, just like they were. I like the change to the QOL of adding the boots to it. Great. I don't know why they buff the stats, but it's not necessarily bad. I don't know why it has such short range. I don't know why it has this weird spec on it. And I don't know. It seems a little weird that it's 3-tick at all. I'm going to be honest. I like the idea of a fast mage weapon, but it feels like it's trying to fit into a weird slot here. I'd love to see them rip the spec off, save it for a different update, put it on a different weapon. This would be a great drop at a different high-level boss in the future. There's no need for it to go on the Mage Bofa as well. You're just doubling down for no reason, and in a way that's really lackluster. The spec is not useful, and I feel like if they add this spec, they're not going to add a good spec in the future for Mage. So we'll just have this instead always. It'll always be the crusty scepter spec and this spec, which you just don't use. Neither of those are you going to use ever for any reason. Rip that spec off, give it some more range. I think we're in a better situation. At least just doing that, I think it'll be in a lot better spot. The gloves, I don't know, man. Like, this just... It's so busted. It's so busted looking at it. I can see how it could be missed because you're thinking of the places you use shadow, and you're not thinking of the places you don't use shadow. I can understand missing it, but they missed it. You guys just missed it. I'm going to be honest. It's ridiculous. It's very hard to calculate this effect, so you can see how like it might be missed. You can't go with this. You just can't go with this. It's so broken. It's so utterly broken. This is the power creep that everybody's worried about. That you guys were worried about, 5 blogs ago with the negative prayer on the cape and the 1% mage damage it had. If that was to keep power creep in check and then throwing this in, I feel like we're just like we're sliding from one end of the boat to the other end of the boat. Are we gonna fall over? Can we just get in the middle of the boat and find something that just works and fits in the game? That's what we've got to do. Like, we can't have something disgustingly broken. We can't have something that's 1% mage damage. There's a happy medium, I swear, in the middle here that we can get to. I feel like throwing the effect on a shield instead. Honestly, you could make it 2 items. Leave this as just a basic upgrade to Torms, and then add that shield that we talked about, maybe with the same effect. So it's only buffing one-handed items, including the new wand. I feel like that would work a lot better. It would make a lot more sense to me. But yeah, this is just broken. Just straight up, like, people are going to shadow everything in the goddamn game. I don't know what to say. That's it. It's busted. I just got word while we're recording in my Discord, they were calking this with shadow at Krill. It's actually, shadow will be better than Scobo now with this. You'll literally just bring Scobo to spec and that's it, which is, it goes to show just how broken it is. It's like you will shadow everything in the game. Anything that came close to not being shadow will be shadow for sure. Everything will be shadow. So these have got to get at the very least tweaked. They will not work in the way they're adding them to the game. They will work. They'll work too well, far too well. Funny shovel, I'm okay with. Make it a little less funny. That's all. Just change that name, maybe. I don't know how I feel about that. But the shovel's a good addition, I think. I like it. Oh, I also like the demon tears. I think it's good to add some kind of currency. This isn't some kind of crazy thing that's being sunk out of the game in mass quantities. I don't feel, so we'll see how valuable they are. They can be used instead of runes on the staff, and it's going to chug through them. So we'll see. Depends how much people are using the new wand, that kind of thing. We'll see. And it also depends what bulk of tiers you need to craft the items. But I think, in theory, this is going to be a good addition, probably, and should keep the boss relatively profitable. I'm honestly concerned at this point that people are exhausted with this. We are on blog 47. I can't remember which blog we're on, 4 or 5 or something. Blog 47 is here, and people, I feel like, aren't even reading these anymore. They're just like so tired of hearing about this, where they're not going to want to change it again, and they're just going to send it. I feel like if they pull this, it's going to pass, and these gloves are going to break the game in half. That's my concern. That's my concern. I hope they don't do that. I know Jagex has taken actions in the past when things were going to be broken. I know Nightmare was going to drop like the super high mage damage tome thing, and they just axed that even though it passed. So I'm hoping they just keep in mind how broken this is, and they realize that it was kind of a mistake. We'll see. We'll see. All right, that's it. Jagex has really got to stop putting out updates on my days off, on like honeymoons and stuff. They never ask me before they do things. What is it about? Okay, I just got married, so we're gonna be coming back on Saturday. When we come back, I'll be doing the in-game wedding, so that should go insane. I'm planning to do it at 5 p.m. PST if you want to show up. We're gonna be going to the Cosmic Entity Plane on World 378. So that should be interesting. I want to like almost crash a world. It should be fun. Make sure you pull up to that. Also, soon enough, I'm going to be painting myself gold, probably on Sunday. Probably. We'll see. We'll see. Because we did win that golden gnome. So I've got to do that, unlike you. All right, that's it. Leave a like if you liked it. Subscribe. All the good stuff. Button pushing. Everything. I'll see you fellas. Bye. Thank you so much. Mwah!